Hello, everybody. Hello, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Let's play chess. You'll notice my new color scheme today. I chose this because we're not far off of my mother's birthday, and she is a proud survivor of cancer, and so supports the Susan G. Komen Foundation when she can. And so pink is in, guys. Let's see. Let's try game in 10 minutes. I haven't played a Nadorf in a while. This might go into a Maroxy bind, but it depends. He's trying to sneak the game into a French defense. None shall pass. Rien pour aller. Easy. I don't know what's the word for there in French. La. I think it's la. Just plain old la. This might weaken black's kingside pawn structure. This might weaken black's kingside pawn structure. Okay, Jord. Nice smooth graph. Unfortunately, a couple. Oh, look at these. They're right at the end, though. The game was won, so I like to go back and, for the love of the game and for the sake of the game, practice this on against computer without that last tidying or whatever it was. Um, yeah, we see that rook to a3 leads to a quicker checkmate. Is rook to a3 best? Yeah, it says best. I don't really see this, folks. Okay. Yeah, the mate just wasn't there, so we're gonna stop the pawn with our king. I'm not exactly sure why this white might be better than the other white, but let's see how the analysis goes without that. I'm really psyched about this game, and that I played well against a strong opponent who played well, and I persevered nonetheless. So let's review from the game as it were, folks. Okay, you see black. Just this is just a very sane and straightforward uh, moves by sane and straightforward moves by black to control the center. White is also aiming definitely to control the center here, and has opened up his her or they king position somewhat here. So these there's some not simplifications, some material trades here, and I felt it best to um, upon bishop takes e4 play bishop takes e4 rather than d takes e4. Mostly I thought this bishop is just so very strong here on e4, and it's going to cost white some thought time and a minor piece to uh, unseat him from this magnificent outpost on e4. Knight to d2, bishop takes g2. A tempo of initiative here is strong because the bishop will win the h3 pawn, unless white plays a strange move like rook to h2, or not only might white win the h3 pawn, but the rook has to move. That breaks up white's chance to castle. That's a joke because of how extremely loose white's king side is. Anyway, you wouldn't want a castle. There's no castling going on the king side of white's position here. So anyway, rook to h2 might be some sort of attempt to scare the bishop away. Nonetheless, I play the correct move. Bishop takes h3 for an extra pawn of material in my coffers, and now we're looking at white has a seriously unsafe king. Black has a 2-pawn lead in material. Black is about a minute behind on the clock. White has more mobile units deployed. White's leading in terms of mobility. Uh, Black has not a safe king, but a reasonably safe king. And I mentioned material. Space, I'd say White has an advantage in space here. Not by a whole lot, but being sort of outnumbering Black in the center in terms of pawns. And with the initiative here, it is White to move. I'd say 50-50 anyway, because I don't see any of White's moves as being particularly strong in capitalizing on initiative. My opponent might have thought at this. My opponent Kronos might have thought at this point, Queen to H5 as a strong move to grab the initiative, get the Queen out there. There's some looming threat. If my Queen wanders too far, then it's Queen takes F7 checkmate. Get an active piece. There's possibilities of that there'd be a doubling along the H file. I think it's a strong move to play against a human being. I'm not sure if I played the correct response. Bishop F5 is probably just about good enough to stop mayhem with this. The Queen can't lead the charge against H7 for start, and it's protected another time now. Now the Bishop is saved by being attacked only once. It's kind of a saving move there. I wonder if there were other good options for Black, but I really like Bishop H5. I like Queen H5. I would love Bishop H5 in this. You know what I'm saying? But Queen H5, I thought it was a strong move, and I think it's kind of unlucky for White that the resource Bishop to F5 is there to save the day for Black. Pawn to G6 is a strong move here. What I had to do, I'm looking at other opportunities, maybe to simplify by developing my knight in the case of an exchange, or without an exchange, we're exchanging on E4, or rather E5, or without that, then we're pushing our opponent's advanced pieces backwards. That kind of stuff. I looked at that for a while. It's okay. It's not bad. These are good moves. But look at all the simple move. Pawn to G6. Threatening the white queen, so that wins a tempo of initiative at least. G7. The G7 square is now open for bishop to G7. And not only that, but then castles in some circumstances. Pawn to G6. Protecting your bishop, protecting my bishop on F5 a second time should the queen need to be called over somewhere else for attack or what have you. Pawn to G6, blocking any thoughts of a checkmate on F7. It's one of these really subtle moves that I've learned to play and look for now that I've finally had a chance in my life to sit down and play what I've always wanted to do. Chess. Sit down and, yeah. I'm finally at the point in my life where I can sit down and play chess. And since then, I've learned to these more subtle moves like G6. The old Jordan would be, actually, I'd probably make the same move without any thought of a follow-up. But, the old Jordan might had one of the knight moves or something. Pawn to G6. It's right there, elegant work. Protecting the bishop. He's not worried. We're not worried about being kicked by the white pawn on E3 if it moves to E4. We've got that spot covered twice, and this we can hold ground if we have to. The queen's being attacked. The attempt of a checkmate on F7 is now definitely not on. The dark squared bishop on F8 can move to G7, and very importantly, might be the piece to capture on E5 and get rid of this extremely powerful knight my opponent has planted here. and thereby opening the way for a kingside castle. Like I said, all this because of pawn to g6. So it's sort of that my game has matured in some ways. It's not always, rock 'em, sock 'em, knock 'em dead, pieces flying off the board, quadruple queen sacrifice, and it's checkmate. But not only that, but all your other games you've ever played are me checkmating you too. It's not that. It's more subtle. It's more simple. It's more straightforward here to play pawn to g6. All right. Now bishop g7, right? Like we said, attacking the knight very directly and making way for potentially a kingside castle. Knight to f3, strong move. As Torch sees this as a check, but come on, my friends. Strong move. Knight to f3, so that there's going to be a very powerful knight on e5 as long as white has anything to say about it. I love this move by white here. I love this, but this is the strongest move on the board, and my opponent played it, and it's not an obvious move at that. So I said, all right, well, let's get down to business. We'll do replacement number 1, and then with knight to d7, again, we see my opponent making use of every last piece of his, her, or they fabric and fiber. So, you might see knight to d7 and say, oh no, I'm going to lose this knight outpost now. My opponent didn't say that. My opponent's move choice dictated quite otherwise. Finding the best move, or one of the best moves by Torch, I consider this the best move. Queen to b5. I have to think about. I spend time thinking about what if queen takes b7. There's 2 pieces on the knight who's now pinned there's 2 pieces on the knight who is now pinned to the king. c6 doesn't work because then queen takes b7 and white is rolling with an attack against a8, an attack and enough force on c6 to then capture. This queen move following this all goes back to making these 2 knights protect each other earlier on. This queen move is phenomenal. And I think, is black kind of saved here? Not entirely, but castling queenside is still by far the best move. Okay, you see here almost by a full pawn in terms of Torch 4's analysis, almost by a full pawn. Queenside castles is the best move. I wasn't counting on that, which means, in a way, again, my butt got a lucky save here. Like, remember before bishop to f5 was, like, I kind of said, well, it was fortunate or luck that I kind of had that resource. Well, guess what, folks? Castles queenside is in that same category here. And then kind of liquidating on d7 after that, because what else is there to do? I found the resource. That's not my opponent's fault, so I think she or they try knight takes d7 and see what happens kind of approach, because we're not, I think that's okay. It's neither amazing nor bad. And now we're in this endgame. Well, white is protecting, meaning white has the inferior position or the inferior evaluation. That we know because of the 2 extra pawns that black has. The 2 extra pawns that black has. That being said, these are the rooks here. Rooks trade off often enough in the endgame, right? This isn't like a crazy thing that doesn't happen. So if these rooks trade off, then we have opposite colored bishops, and as I've said before, those games can be very drawish. They have this tendency where one side sets up a like a blockade along usually one of the medium or long diagonals, and the other side can't get at his opponent's bishop. It's simply against the rules of chess for white's dark squared bishop to attack black's light squared bishop. At least directly, it can't. So yeah, these games become drawish. So the aim for white here would be to trade off rooks, and then blockade somehow. I'm not going to let that happen. So let's see how I did that. I like white's expanding on the queen side here, but it's not just expanding. I think there's some ideas of playing rook to a2, having a very strong second rank, but not just for the purpose of the second rank. Perhaps for an eventual doubling of rooks on the h file, and try to. The other part of white's plan should be to try to pick off enemy pawns, and doubling on the h file would be part of that. I believe it doesn't mean it works. I think I showed that the position doesn't allow for it quite to work, but it's the right strategy. You know, when you're in the game and you're playing the game, you would do something like this expansion on the queen side that my opponent is playing. Rook c4 is a strong move. Black is pushing for a win, so I don't want to lock pawns all the way, right? You get in some sort of locked pawn structure. If I play c5, I mean, yeah, my opponent's going to capture, fine, but let's say if there were a pawn on c4, that would be not good. It wouldn't be horrible, but with a lot of locked pawns, there's not enough there's not enough room for black's rook to move around. But with a rook here, I both keep my opponent's pawns, keep this bishop is so horribly set in its place, and rook to c4 helps limit white's minor piece. The bishop here on d2. I said d2 on d2. This piece is so very limited in what he can do. So I thought that was a good move, and I'm going to expand on the king side, of course, with my passed pawn. Passed pawns are meant to be pushed, my friends. Here comes h7 to h5. The rook goes to h4, and I'm glad to not quite imprison him, but very seriously affect this rook's scope with bishop to g4. Now this bishop is strong, and this rook is not. Doubling, I mean, it's a thing to do here. It's one of the things to do, but it's kind of, not to be mean, but it's kind of against, like, what's white actually going to do here? There are pieces on the board, and there's a lot of moves to be played, but strategically thinking, I don't think white has a game here, because even doubling on the h file, like I believe, remember just a few minutes ago I said white should aim for that. It doesn't help. The best white can do is is a rook takes, and then perhaps bishop takes, rook takes, pawn takes, or I think I might have had that wrong, but the material can't go better than the bishop and a pawn for a rook, which is still a loss in terms of relative piece value. 1, 3, 5. The knights are all 3. Of course, the queen is 8. The king is a strange thing to tackle. Either 4 as an attacking piece in the endgame, or infinity as a piece, as a marker of piece importance and relevance to any one game. But yeah, so black can't start anything here. Not only that, it's just more directly, I think I could say about this, is that h5 is guarded by 2 inferior valued pieces. In addition, a rook, but I slide that rook away under the principle of I don't need anything more than white's best result. White's best result actually helps me. So that's kind of what I'm getting to. A little bit roundabout, sorry about that. But king to g3. g5 just to sort of break things up. We gotta get some pieces moving, some pieces flowing. Capturing on g5. Before I played g5, I realized that capturing on g5 with the rook was safe, even in the event of pawn to e4. Pawn to e4 here doesn't really. It's not a bad thing for black to. Black will be able to defend against it. Now the position becomes more and more in black's favor. We see that these rooks, they're doubled quite nicely, but they're not important to the game anymore. I mean, they are, but not as important. So more pawn exchanges now. Some of these rules about pawn exchanges I struggle with this myself, my friends. I think sometimes it's good to do some pawn exchanges, but don't go crazy with it. If you're pushing for the win, you want to do a pawn exchange or two, or maybe even three, and a lot of it has to do with how many pawns are left on the chessboard. And if you're pushing for a win, you want to have three or more pawns on the chessboard. So you push, according to that. Trade and push according to that. I should have been saying trade. Rook to f1 is fine. So just some of these moves are just building up to rook to e2 check, and we pick up the bishop, and now it's quite well. No, there was still test. I'm telling you, my opponent was a strong chess player, testing me still after. Now I have the bishop in my coffers. I found the right move. It was how many good moves were there? See, there's some of these moves are not all that favorable for black. I mean, in general, being up 5.89 is a good thing, but that still means you've lost somehow off of best play from that was played here with rook to c3. Chugging along on the f-file, it's the best move. It's definitely the best move. What black might have tried bishop e6 here. It's not necessary, but it's sort of like a, I don't know, in a time rush you might try that to just, in any event, block or capture, whichever, depending on white's move on f7. But it didn't have to do that. Picking up with the exchange, and now neatly rook takes f3 also covers the promotion threat on the f-file. So that was nice. There it is. That's nice because I loaded the the pink color because of my mom, with whom I'm very, very close. I have been all my life, and my mom's a cancer survivor, and this is pretty much Susan G. Komen pink. And the move that the computer pointed out was not all that good. Was capturing on f6, with the black rook capturing on f6. Some people think of pawns as akin to children to some extent. So capturing on f6 was not the thing to do. And not only was it not the thing to do, it was entirely not the thing to do, because there was rook to f1 checkmate available instead. I don't know. There's a lot of things coming together all at once. I love that. It's fun. So this game, I don't know. Anyway, there may be more news on that in the not too distant future. I'm going to even analyze the game as this. I'll keep that just for now at least. Review. I often say analyze when I mean review, my friends. And this will be the where I'm just getting the computer numbers on this, and then it's so long for this session. Yeah, great and wonderful, um, well played game. I love it. I love it. We'll let the game play out in the background, and we're almost wrapping up this uh, chess broadcasting and streaming session. The rook lift was good there. That yeah, it led to rook c4. All right. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Have a great night.